Mics are hot, sir.
Well, hello everyone. It's now 11:30. We're going to go and kick off our pre-commission. So first for the president's report, just wanted to let the commission know we're going to be receiving a report from Ben with a legislative wrap-up, and we'll be receiving a report about the impacts that the new property tax bill has on ECHD. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and we'll have a time to ask questions and fully understand the impact that it's going to have on the agency. Next, we have some joint meetings scheduled. If you haven't already noticed that from Stacy, so we have a joint meeting with Garden City on April 18th, and then April 21st, we have a joint meeting with ITD. And then lastly, Commissioner Gold has been, as she's been meeting with her cities in her district, there's definitely been an interest from our cities around how can we, update our template around the development review process and various development applications. So we're working with staff on providing a great template and framework that cities can use to make informed decisions about how development is impacting our road system, which is what we're all about. So Commissioner Gold, do you have anything else to add?
Nope, that covers it. Thank you.
Of course. So thank you, Bruce. Thanks, team, for that. And any questions?
No, but
Oh, you look like you have something though.
I do have a couple things, so I thought I'd bring them up at this meeting. First, I appreciated an email that Commissioner Goldthorpe did respond to the City of Boise's meeting last week, and I think one of the things we need to tee up is this whole notion of setting up a more consistent sidewalk trust or some process where if a developer is being expected to build a sidewalk, we're not too sure when the other connections are going to be made. We have to go through the 5-year integrated process. And in my neighborhoods, there's quite a number of sidewalks that were required of developments that don't go anywhere, and they're clearly not standard now. So they'll have to be ripped up eventually. So it's not only a connecting them, but ripping up and putting them in. So there has to be something so that a developer can have some options, put it into this trust. It'll be used to pay for a sidewalk on this street, hopefully sooner rather than later, rather than also spend your money building something that might come out. So that's something we just keep running into, especially in the older neighborhoods where you just there's tons of pieces of sidewalks out there. And I strongly believe, as Commissioner Goldthorpe has mentioned time and time again, we have to connect these sidewalks. And it's a slow process of just doing it through the 5-year plan.
Commissioner Hanson, I would agree that that's also an issue across the county.
Yeah.
Even, my district especially.
Yeah, and so it sounds like it was raised at the Boise City Council yesterday. I saw a TELUS on all the, what do you call it when you put tar on the preparing the street for chip crack seal. Snakes on the road. I think it'd be great. Lots of people are asking, why are you putting all these snakes on the road? Well, I keep telling them, it's our turn for chip sealing. So just prepare yourself. So maybe that's a communications idea. Talk about snakes on the road. Get ready. Chip sealing's coming. Hopefully the weather will change. I'm sure it will. I hope we do have a spring and we don't go straight from winter to summer. But and of course, it's Pothole Week. And let's see, I think it's about 55% of them of the requests have to do with a little street between Boise State University and the interstate on Broadway. So I hope we can tee up a key conversation just about what would, and do some research. What would it take for ACHD to do the maintenance on that segment, and for ITD to pay us for that? So that would be, it's like when we do the maintenance on all the other streets, what would it take so that we have some dollar amounts and we can start talking about it? Because it's pretty glaring. The facilities on either side of Broadway are in great shape. Kudos to our maintenance team. Broadway is, I live 3 blocks from Broadway and I hear about it and see it every day. Those are, and I don't have any questions on the consent agenda, but I do appreciate that we are a partner with Garden City and Boise on the non-point source pollution agreement, the drainage agreement. This is one where clearly has nothing to do with primarily facilitating motor vehicles, but in the whole scheme of things, it's logical that we as the owner of the right-of-way need to manage and work closely to keep the health and safety of people who are drinking water. And so I think it's just really important. It points out to the complexity of just saying, well, you should just mostly talk about or prioritize moving motor vehicles. And it's like, well, we have a drainage system and our job is to participate in keeping people healthy. And we're doing that in partnership with our local governments. We weren't given the authority just to do transportation. We were actually given jurisdiction over that piece of land that is called the right-of-way. So I really appreciate that. And I'm glad that's moving forward with Boise City, Garden City, the upstreamers on the Boise River system who are benefiting the health of those downstream.
Just to let you know, Jan Communications is currently working on a crack seal video.
All right, snakes on the road.
Thank you, Stacy. Not literal snakes, for the record. Yeah. All right, so are there any general issues commissioners like to bring up or schedule for a future discussion? Are there any questions about items on today's agenda? We do have some questions about items, just want to get it right, 7 through 10. Is that correct, Commissioner Goldthorpe? So, do you have any like specific questions that you want to ask before the director gives a little bit more background about the agreements themselves?
No, not specifically. I simply, with regard to those items that Commissioner Goldthorpe has pointed out, before deciding what to do about them, I'd like to discuss it briefly with the commission.
So we can do that now. So, Director, do you mind providing a little bit more background?
Oh, absolutely. And
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
just so you know, I have absolutely no questions about the agreements. This is all politically motivated, my questions. So that's why I wanted to take it off the consent agenda.
So do you want to just move it to the regular agenda then?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have any problems with that, Director?
absolutely not, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll do that then. All right, Director.
Madam President, Commissioners, good morning. Great to have you all here. Commissioner Hanson, I was going to respond regarding the snakes, but it's already been done, and I will assure you and the entire commission that I do share the pain that the citizens are talking about both on Eagle and on Broadway with District 3. I'm continually reminded that in May, if I'm not mistaken, May, they're going to be redoing Broadway. That's their plan. I haven't seen this. And May starts also a redo of Eagle. Now, that's might be a great topic for your joint session coming up on and such. But anyway, they're well aware on those going forward, and they do try to respond. They just probably don't have the same flexibility that we have when it comes down to operations. So with that, commissioners have lots to share with you today. But first, I'd like to ask Jennifer to come up and brief you on her innovations when it comes down to the annual initiatives that maintenance is going through, and to give you an update of where the world's greatest maintenance team really is at this point in time. Jennifer?
President Pickering, Commissioners. For the record, Jennifer Behringer, Deputy Director of Maintenance. As you know, we have the focus this year is accelerate, innovation, or lose. I won't go into the details on this slide. I'll just jump right into our big three initiatives for maintenance. Just at the 40,000 foot level, initiative number one is to create a think tank Tiger Team to explore new fleet technology with roadways, jurisdictions nearby, and education centers. And our third initiative was to establish new training strategy, which kind of re-looks at how we train. So for our first initiative, creating the think tank, we've made some good progress in the last month and are on a great momentum forward. In March, we had the official formation of the group. They came together and brainstormed a kind of a cool name, which helps in the whole forming stage of putting a group together. And their team name is Chaos. Change has advantage over stagnation. Now, so as part of this group, the first meeting was setting the initiative, determining roles and responsibilities, and understanding what they were really there for. We're coming up with initiatives, innovations, different ways of looking at fleet, and this might have some impact on ACHD, good, bad, how's it going to impact the community, those things. So they formed. This month, in April, their focus is going to be looking at EV sweepers, looking at internal and external impacts of that, and then looking into grants for that EV money, which we know is out there, and how can we kind of leverage that, especially as we're building our new facilities. We've already mentioned for Apple and U-Stick Yard, we've already set the infrastructure to know that we're going to be more than likely moving to EV in the future. So having that foundation and getting at least the conduits put in for that future growth when we're ready for it. Also this month, we're looking at Compass has an education series this week or next that's EV in the Treasure Valley, and that's got one part there also where they're looking at jurisdictions and how can jurisdictions help for the full Treasure Valley thing. So we're participating in that. In May, we've got a sweeper demo scheduled. That's an EV sweeper. So we're going to be evaluating the business and the operations impact of that sweeper when it comes out to us in May. So the next initiative was the increasing partnerships. A lot of movement, especially in fleet in this area. So Fleet reached out and has been working with the City of Boise. So those two fleet managers have come together and they're starting their cross flow, looking at what they're ordering for their fleet, what we're ordering for ours, and see if we can kind of leverage the contracts a little bit to ease it on both sides. Fleet also initiated dialogue with ITD to align our bid specs. So when ITD puts their specs out for fleet equipment, they're kind of aligned in what we would like too. So it gives that opportunity for piggyback options between the two contracts. And again, it kind of is the economy of scale. When you have larger bids going out, you can overall reduce the costs. On the operations side, last month we met with Nampa and Canyon County Highway Districts to talk to them about boundary responsibilities. And as such, with the Highway 16 project coming through, it's a good time to look at how that's going to change who does what on those boundary lines. So there's some kind of logical changes that will probably be coming your way very soon for decision on that as we maybe swap some of those responsibilities. For April, in fact, today, we are setting up for the Skills USA competition, which is hosted by CWI, and it's a big competition, statewide competition. This is our first year participating in this, and this is some of the fruits of some of the early partnerships that we started to establish a couple of months ago with CWI. So we are going to be participating as a judge in the competition. We have some of our equipment out there, primarily a sweeper. So the students will look at the sweeper and they have a list of, I think, 10 things they need to identify on the sweeper as part of that competition, and they'll get graded on that. So great opportunity for us to get the foot in the door with the CWI students, get our equipment out there, get our name out there. Really great partnership. And then, of course, we've got Joe Schoen who will be out there doing judging as well. Quarterly Highway District meeting with Canyon County Highway District, Nampa Highway District, City of Nampa, Caldwell, and Parma. There's a big quarterly meeting that they do that we're hoping to participate with. And the last update I got was that was going to be this month, April 20th. So we're looking to potentially get that invite for that as well. I think they did invite us for that, so we'll plan on attending that. And then we're working on setting up a tour of the Dennis Tech Education Center. As you may recall, we had a winner from Dennis Tech several years ago for our sweeper competition, but we've got a kind of a reinvigoration of that relationship with them. And again, the idea is we get our name out to the tech centers early. They know that ACHD is a viable path for career paths. Huge benefits to be granted there. And then we've got the fleet meeting that happens monthly that our fleet team takes advantage of and attends. Good opportunity for cross flow with all the fleet managers and coordinators in the Treasure Valley. Next month, a big push will be for chip seal. You already talked about the crack seal as well. For chip seal, we always historically go and talk to Ada County Sheriff's Office. We've put the invitation out to the cities for us to present to them. Most of the cities haven't really taken us up on it, but I think this year with chip seal being in primarily the Boise area, I think it'll be a big push for us to want to do more outreach with the Boise area so they understand really what chip seal is going to be, the impact of chip seal. Our third initiative is taking a look at our training strategy and kind of changing the way we look at training. Again, huge initiatives on the fleet side, interfaced with Western states, looking at how they do their development of their techs, of their mechanics, and seeing if there's anything in their development plan that we could leverage to develop our mechanics. Same with CWI workforce development plan, you know, as they are developing their workforce on the CWI side, how are their trainers getting developed to train the next generation? What is that we could leverage for training our team as well? And then from that, we're also developing our lead worker and mechanic mentorship plan. So as we're bringing we've got a very large group of new mechanics that have joined us within the last year. And we're finally to the point where we're almost full again on our fleet side. So recognizing all the new people that we have in, the talent that they're bringing from their past experiences, and where we know we need them to be, how is that all going to get balanced out, and building that mentorship plan so that there's a deliberate training and development of our mechanics. We've also built our initial advancement training framework. So thinking, how are people going to advance from a GEO to a senior equipment operator, to a lead worker, to a crew chief, and kind of understanding what some of those steps are and what the training and education should look like for leadership training and skills development. And then on our drainage side, we had a GEO position that we converted to a senior equipment operator. This was a great opportunity as we had presented with all the work that we still have to do to meet our obligations for NPDES permitting, and our drainage team taking a GEO, making that person a senior operator so that they are in charge of the inspections and the timeline and prioritizing, but then also using that senior equipment operator to lead training for the drainage crew. It's been one of the gaps that we've had in that area, so we're making progress there. Moving into the next month, we'll kind of finalize, clarify, and augment that development plan I just mentioned for our mechanics. And then we've got Entnire on tap, who's going to be coming here to do some training. And rather than it just being training for us, now Entnire is who provides our chipper box and a few other things, but instead of it just being an ACHD only training, it's going to be opened up as a regional thing. So it's going to be training and partnerships that we're tackling on that will host a training and bring other jurisdictions in and take advantage of that training while we have the Entnire expertise here on site for that. So very excited about that. And then as we look at training through all of our crews, as our broom crew continues to grow, as our technology changes and adapts, and we start adding new pieces of equipment like the mini sweeper and potentially a mid-sized sweeper here in the next year, having a senior equipment operator on our broom crew is kind of in our pipeline as well. So we have that ability to have a trainer whose job it is to make sure everybody is queued up on all the pieces of equipment. And then in May, we're going to dig deeper on our partnerships with College of Western Idaho, the CWI pipeline and recruitment. This has kind of been a long time coming. For past year, we've really talked about how can we create a position so that when we have somebody going through CWI and we identify that person as like, okay, this is the person that we're maybe sponsoring to go through that training program, that we have a place for them to apprentice while they're working through their education at CWI. They can work side by side with our mechanics. And then we would have an intern position, as we've already talked about, potentially available. So when they finish their internship and finish their CWI training, we have a place for them to come on board with our fleet team. So lots of stuff, lots of movement on our initiatives. It's been a great year so far, and we still have a lot of work ahead of us. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. What an exciting update. Commissioners, any questions?
Madam President, I
Commissioner
would just
Hanson.
echo that. This is tremendous. I mean, we're tasked with managing and taking care of a $3 to $4 billion public asset, and it's your operation that does that, and is so critical. And so I just really appreciate that, and the innovations and the ability to see this as a long-term career opportunity. I'm surprised, based on the high confidence of our maintenance department, that the other canyon districts don't unite to say, let's create a countywide highway district over here too, because they're doing such a good job maintaining the local system across the border.
I just also want to give you kudos to Jennifer about exploring the feasibility of EV vehicles to our fleet, and then also thinking holistically about the conduit. How does that connect to these various facilities? Because that is a massive piece to making sure that it actually functions in the way that we want it to. So, which I'm not surprised at all that you're thinking so thoroughly around this type of shift where it makes sense. So thank you for your leadership. Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, just a couple things. Commissioner Hanson brought up at the beginning here how he hopes for spring versus right going, as opposed to right going into summer. You've probably noticed all that white stuff up on Bogus Basin, and all the pre-work that is already being done and moving water into the different dams across the area. As such, we've already taken steps this week to review everything when it comes down to flood operations. As you depart today, you might take a look at the Traffic Management Center. There's this big thing going around it called a Damn It Dam. It is, and that's really the name and such, but that's one of the things that we initiated several years back when we had the massive flooding from Snowmageddon, to protect the integrity of the Traffic Management Center and a lot of other key equipment that we have going. So that is being looked at. We are prepping all actions for both Adams and the TMC across the board this week for survivability, to include review of all our traffic light generators, all the different things that we will be asked to do if something does go awry. Looking at fuel stations, we've looked at our supply of riprap, because as some of you know, that when we do have these issues, the bridges in Garden City and then in Eagle and then Duck Alley are the key areas where we have issues that the mayors are very, they'll call us immediately. We want to make sure we have everything ready to go. Commuter Ride is reviewing their prep support for VRT, and of course the Emergency Operations Center, in case, as we have in the past, have to move folks from areas to Red Cross stations that are set up through Ada County. We want to make sure everything is prepared and we have all the folks available to make that happen. Staff is reviewing all actions that would impact the Ada County's EOC operations. As you know, we sit on that, and we're going through all the checklist requirements to make sure everything's been dusted off, and that we are not surprised that on Sunday, when it becomes 70 degrees, we get a call shortly after that. And we're also reviewing all known flood areas. Areas such as Two Rivers Crossing in Eagle has a history of flooding that traps the residents in there. So it's well underway. We think it's very important to do that now, while the temperature's still in the 20s and 30s, because it's going to be changing very, very quickly. And ACHD will be asked to participate across the board on that. Commissioners, in April, there's a lot in front of you, and I will send this out to you. Make sure it's on your calendars. But starting tonight, there's a meeting at Lake Hazel for Hollyland Traffic. Commissioner Goldthorpe You and Ryan Head will be attending that going forward. April 12th, we have the Boise Chamber event for Delta Airlines at the Hillcrest Country Club. Commissioners Pickering, McKinney, Goldthorpe, and Gold, you are signed up for that. Let's move forward. Stacy and I and a couple others will also be there in case you need anything at all. On the 12th to the 13th is, as Jennifer stated earlier, we have the ACHC Maintenance Rodeo out at the fairgrounds. You're all invited, both for lunch and for the awards ceremony that we go through. This will be the team that we send to the national competition. And as you know, we won gold overall last year for that, which is absolutely great. And ITD took second. So we had a 1-2 punch for Idaho. On April 18th, we have the joint meeting with Garden City, as Commissioner Pickering has already suggested or let you know. Topics. Commissioners, if you could, we have a couple topics from the mayor and such, which I'll share here in a little bit. But commissioners, if you could kind of focus your thoughts to Commissioner Pickering on this, and if I could get those probably on Friday, that would be great, so we can put this together, send it, and get your final approval before it goes anywhere and such. We'd be very appreciative of that. On April 19th is the National Safety Awareness Day, commissioners, and it is a commission meeting, and I'm going to ask you all to wear orange. That is the color of the day, and I'll remind you of that as we get closer. We are also, on the 19th, we have a Cole and Ustick Library static sweeper display. We are supporting Boise's Public Library Fair, and we actually have people reading to kids on this. It's a great event. On the 20th of April, we have the WTS Gala for awards. As you know, we have 2 members of our team being awarded. Commissioner Goldthorpe, we have you already signed up for that. April 21st, we have a joint meeting with ITD. Same request, please, if you could funnel your thoughts or recommended topics to Commissioner Pickering. If we can get those Friday, that'd be great. And we'll put them together and send them back to you for final approval. April 22nd, Commissioner Gold, you and Tom Laws have an HOA meeting with the Bellaterra HOA and such, and I think we'll have a couple of things for you prior to. April 23 to the 25th is the Boise Leadership Conference in Sun Valley. April 25th, of course, is the all-staff meeting at Adams. It's going to be a very important all-staff meeting on that day. April 26th, I'm taking 15 folks to Mountain Home Air Force Base, managers and superintendents, to tour the base and visit with our squadron that we're supporting. It's also Administrative Professionals Appreciation Day. I will remind you all again as we get closer to that. It's also National Denim Day night. So you have a night meeting, the staff will be in denim as we move forward that. Same day, we're at the Brown Library with the sweeper static display and reading to the kids for supporting Boise's Public Library Fair. On the 27th, it's Bring Your Kids to Work Day. Here, we haven't done this for 3 years now based on COVID. It's going to be absolutely great, but it will be a madhouse here, but lots of fun for everybody. And then finally in April, I want to let you know that after 30 years, Ada County has raised our annual contribution to the Ada County Emergency Management Fund from $10,000 to $13,500. We're very happy to pay that. And as you all know, that's for emergency responders, for police, fire, other things. They go by head count. They don't do that with the Ada County Highway District because we have 502,000 head counts. We have a flat fee they ask us to support for that. Going into May, May is going to be more in the definition of May in motion. More on that as we come forward. I think you're going to, it's going to be a lot more than commuter ride. So with that, commissioners, that's my update. I'll send you all this here for your calendars, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thanks, Director. Okay, thanks for giving us 30 seconds. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's now 12 o'clock. Welcome to our ACHD meeting. Please join us in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Y'all were really itching to get up this time. Oh, beat me to it. Okay. The first order of business is to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next order of business is to adopt the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and are action items unless otherwise noted. The consent agenda is enacted by one motion. There is no separate discussion on items on the consent agenda. If a commissioner or citizen would like, they may request any item be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. And we do have such a request, so I will entertain a motion to amend the consent agenda.
Sure. I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda with items 7, 8, 9, and 10 being moved to the regular agenda as numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, well, is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the regular agenda. Our first one is Resolution 2403, vacation of public right-of-way for Jackson Food Stores Incorporated on West First Street Public Alley. This is a public hearing, and I officially open the public hearing, and welcome Mr. Dave Serdar.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. For the record, David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor for the Ada County Highway District. As was said, this is a public hearing and decision briefing for a vacation in Star. Sorry, went to. ACHD has received an application from Jackson's Food Stores for a vacation of approximately 0.046 acres. ACHD has received our $2,500 application fee, and we did also receive appraisal for the value for the property that was valued at $34,500. This is the vicinity map of the area. As you can see, Star Road comes right here. State Street is right here. In yellow, this is all of the pieces of property that Jackson's owns. So this would actually make that north piece one actual piece of property. As you can see, the alley, not the alley, but the right of way to be vacated is that right there in red, which is, this is a more close-up view. As you can see, this current right of way is not providing any access to any of the adjacent areas. The alleyway does provide access, which is to survive in the vacation and in the new site plan. Staff has reviewed the appraisal and recommends a vacation at the appraised amount of $34,500. Throughout this process, no ACHD staff had objections to the vacation. There was no public or stakeholder opposition to this vacation. Jackson's Food has also previously submitted they've previously submitted their conditional use permit, excuse me, I got a little tongue-tied there, which ACHD had a staff approval or an approval on February 2nd, 2023. So Jackson's has been moving forward with all the appropriate entities to do this vacation. It is staff recommendation that we adopt and sign resolution 2403 authorizing the proposed vacation of public right-of-way as the applicants have completed all commission and staff requirements. I will remain standing for any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions?
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney?
Yeah, Dave, this, let's see, the east-west alleyway that is on the property and you've indicated will remain.
Correct.
So is it the intent of Jackson's Food Stores to develop the southern portion of the property that fronts on State Street with a food store and do what? What do they plan to do with the northern portion of it? Or the northern
Well,
section?
the whole piece is to be a Jackson's, with 6 islands. If we go to one of the, I'll read the report here, but in the conditional use permit, they were gonna make sure that alleyway meets all of our standards and use that for their 17-foot access. So the property owners on the west would still be able to drive and use that as an access to Star Road,
I see.
but it would be developed into the site. That's how I've read it in the conditional use.
Okay,
permit.
so basically then the alley access will go through the Jackson's parking lot?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
It'll be a part of that road.
Okay, and so the existing dwellings, the residential units that are on that north section, they're all going to be torn down?
If I can go back. Commissioner McKinney, everything within the yellow will be torn down.
Right, okay. All right, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Are there any further questions?
I was just wondering, since it's in
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Commissioner Gold's district and it's such a small piece of property, who's gonna scrape the snow? Yeah.
Okay. Is the applicant here?
Didn't hear you volunteer.
Okay. Welcome.
Madam President, members of the commission, Stephanie Hopkins with KM Engineering, 5725 North Discovery Way in Boise. We're in agreement with the staff report, and Mr. Serdar covered our request well. I'll stand for questions if you have any.
I don't think we have any.
All right.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any member of the public?
We have nobody signed up. We're good.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners,
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe,
I make a motion that we approve resolution number 2403 to vacate the right-of-way for Jackson Stores.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you, Dave. All right, moving on to item number 2 on our agenda. Previously, item number 7 on the consent agenda.
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
I think we can probably discuss all of these at once,
Okay,
even though we might have to vote 4 times.
okay. I was wondering how, if we wanted to package it or if we needed to do it in isolation, so, okay. So, as it relates to just item number 2,
Which is
so you want to have a discussion about all 4 just together, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so
Can I start?
go for it.
Okay. What we are doing here, in my opinion, is jumping the gun a little bit on approving projects and appropriating funds for Highway 16 connection projects, and we don't yet have the money to pay for that from the state. I know it's been appropriated. It was appropriated last year. The governor signed a bill. We had an assurance about 95% that it was good and that we'd get the funds. We didn't. We haven't. This year, I understand the chances are getting it maybe close to 100%, but we still don't have it. And I would just assume that we eliminated the opportunity or temptation to expend any other taxpayer dollars other than what we might be receiving from the state for the Highway 16 connections, that we defer these until we've got that money.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldthorpe. And I agree with your concern, and the track history hasn't been ideal, obviously. But I want to invite Bruce or Steve up to explain these agreements and how, and what recourse do we have if worst case scenario, we don't receive those funds?
Madam President, Commissioners, thank you. Again, the concern is always well-founded on operations. I would like to remind the Commission that these projects are in the approved CIP. They're in the approved Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. They're all impact fee eligible, just as a foundation across the board. And as normal, we'd probably be doing it sometime in the future. That being said, all of these agreements that are in front of you right now are a starting point. And the Commission has full authority at any time to stop these agreements. So, case in point, for the two projects that we're asking for your concurrence and permission to move forward on the design features, that starting point is basically survey, geotech. It's going to take about 3 to 4 months to even get to that point. Again, at any time, as the contracts are written, any time that you feel that this is not in Ada County's best, ACHD's Ada County's best interest, or you feel any concern, you can stop this and no dollars move forward. This is not a upfront where we say, here's the cost, we're giving you everything across the board. This is a start of a journey in anticipation of the projects that are be coming down in association with the Highway 16 ITD projects. But then again, I want to remind the Commission that these are in your Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. They are in the CIP. They are impact fee eligible across the board. And so that speaks to the design part. The other parts is our request for your concurrence to establish the fair distribution of who will pay what percentage of when those things come forward. Our team has went out and done some very thorough scope lies into whose jurisdiction. So we've come up with recommendations for all of your considerations to assign those percentages to the Ada County Highway District, Napa Highway District, and Napa, depending upon which project you're looking at. But at the end of the day, your staff is very comfortable, again, in making the recommendation, knowing that we can pull the plug. You can pull the plug at a heartbeat's notice. Commissioner Pickering up and probably use a different term on the next one. Thank you.
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
just for the record, to use Director Wong's words, I feel that way already, which is why I want to defer this until the funds are in the bank.
Madam President,
Commissioner Gold.
do we have any kind of a presumed timeline for when that might be?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Pickering, Commissioner Gola.
When the funds might be in the bank?
If I'm not mistaken, unless an emergency is declared, between now and 1 July. Is that fair? Yeah, between now and 1 July. Now, I've already started some discussion with the leadership at ITD. They want to know, like, when. Have not received a reply yet. But that's the time frame.
Was there an emergency declared on that bill when it was passed and signed?
I didn't think so. Yeah.
Oh, it's only an emergency when they want to, when the legislature wants to take over roads around the Capitol then. Okay.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
Director Wong, let me sort of talk about alternatives. At this point, it sounds like, well, we've got kind of three alternatives. The one is just go forward, the way it's set up right now. The other is, as Commissioner Goldthorpe has suggested, defer and not do anything until, we have the dollars in our hands. And you've mentioned that we can stop things if they start and the funds don't come through. We can stop things, and I have to admit, my inclination is not to start and stop. I don't like that prospect, simply because so much gets lost when a project is stopped and then restarted. There's always it's like the startup lost time at an intersection when the lights change. There's always a certain amount of time that gets lost, doesn't get used. In a project, it's a different kind of thing, but of course, the reality is there's always a certain amount of waste in doing something. Would it be, we have, I presume, with these, for the design aspect of these projects, we've already got engineering firms, consultants on board to start these, and they're just waiting for the go-ahead to get started, right?
That's correct.
Okay. What would be the effect if we were to say, we're gonna put that on hold until we have the funds, and then you get to start? What's the effect of that versus, starting now, and then maybe if we have a problem later on, then we stop? From a practical standpoint, from a money standpoint, what are the effects of doing it that way?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, let me try to walk through that. First off, the impact is potentially a delay. In other words, what the staff is asking the commission to do is give us the authority to start this long journey we're going to be on. As I said earlier, if the commission says start, what we're actually looking at is just starting the survey portion, the geotech portions, which is a 3 to 4 month journey across the board. And if you kind of, that kind of lines up to anywhere between now and July-ish timeframe when ITD is required to then make those determinations. From a practical point, again, your staff wants to get going. I'm just being candid, and there is a lot in front of us, and we think that the timing that we would be able to utilize now on these initial parts would be very beneficial as we get into the bigger parts of those projects downstream. From a funding point, I think the impact would be minimal on either side of whatever direction you want to go. If the commission says go, then we will start that process with those design firms, and as you know, the standard payment process over time. And so our initial outpour is going to be, not that much. If the commission wishes to wait, again, it's not a minimal. It's not a massive amount of dollars that we're actually saving, and we're losing time. And so I hope that sort of answers your question.
So, well, are the design costs, that we're looking at here, these contracts that we have for doing the design work, are the amounts for those already in our current budget? Is that something we've already planned to spend, or is it all intended? Was the plan to take this money from the money we get from the state, or was the plan simply to spend our own dollars on this, and then the state money goes in different directions?
Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, my name is Justin Lucas. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Projects here at the Highway District. Commissioners, yes, we have indicated these projects in our budget as initiating design within this year. The way we look at this funding type is similar to federal. It's kind of more like a reimbursement. I mean, the way the funds work, the $36 million will come into the Highway District's funding structure. It's not like it's sitting in a separate account that's spent on these projects. It comes into our funding structure, and then we allocate it based on the commission's direction, which up to this point has been expended on these corridors in support of the Highway 16 expansion. So I guess an answer to your question, as best I understand it, would be if we're not able to begin the process to start prepping to spend this money, it becomes very difficult to spend any of the money within this fiscal year if we're not able to get the consultants under contract and begin the process to design the projects.
Okay.
Commissioner McKinney, can we hold on a second for follow-up? Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Yes. Now I'm remembering very well the conversation we had not that long ago when we had this exact same conversation relative to the geotech and the surveying around McDermott Road. And at that time, we ask that not come back to us again for any other projects related to Highway 16 until we had funding. And yet, and I'm not mad at staff at all. You're just doing your job, and I love you guys. But I am not pleased that we have to make this decision now when we asked not to have to make it months ago.
Madam President, members of the commission, certainly not staff's intent to go against any commission direction. As of right now, ACHD staff, through any commission direction, have not spent any funds on any of the projects which we have identified as Highway 16 supportive. That includes funds for survey or geotech on any of the segments. We have been negotiating with the Nampa Highway District and the City of Nampa to come up with the agreements that are here before you today as part of the action to try and, because these are joint projects with them, they have indicated a desire to continue to move forward. We have worked with them. Their councils and highway district commissions have signed those agreements in anticipation of moving forward. And in no way does that mean you have to do it today. I'm just giving you an update on where we're at. And we are bringing these forward with a full anticipation to try and move as quickly as possible when these funds are allocated to the highway district. We want to be ready to go. And that's our intent.
Madam President, but you guys have plenty to do in the next 3 or 4 months if we defer this, correct?
Well,
I already know the answer to that.
yeah.
Sir, there's always plenty to do
I know.
at the Ada County Highway District.
Commissioner McKinney, did you have any other follow-up questions
Well,
before we move on?
just as a follow-up, I have to admit, I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Lucas that time, in this case, the money part of it is the smaller part and the time is the more critical part. And so I would be inclined to go forward, making sure that we let our consultants and everyone know that it's possible that if things don't work out, we might have to, blow the whistle and stop things if the state money doesn't come through. And so long as everybody's aware of that and understands that and is willing to work within that, I think and I understand what's involved with, the preliminary work of doing surveying and geotechnical investigation and so on. Those are the sorts of things that we will have to do in any case, no matter where the money comes from. And so it wouldn't be wasted, it would be useful. So anyway, that's my inclination.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you, Madam President. So it seems to me there's two sets. One, there's a set of interagency agreements entering into with the Canyon Highway District, Nampa Highway District, City of Nampa. And those are basically, okay, this is how we will operate once this gets going, and it defines who does what, who pays for what, et cetera. So there's a set, that's number 8 and number 10 on the consent agenda. I guess that's number 3 and number 5 now on the regular agenda. And then there's the ones that start to appropriate money or spend money that's in the budget, or spend it in anticipation of money coming on the professional services agreement. So those are the ones that incur some level of obligation that we would have to pay for. You can't enter into a professional services contract without agreeing to pay them once they start working. The question I have is that since last year, when it was sort of like, okay, straightforward, this is how ACHD will cooperate in supporting the infrastructure for Highway 16's build out. It got a hiccup in that process, but in the interim now, the legislature has imposed more of an application process, sort of a bureaucratic process to go through. They've written it in a way that no other type of agency can apply for these funds, but nonetheless, they did create a bureaucratic process, or some, that's not used in a pejorative term, but they created a process for us to have to go through, the taxpayers to go through to apply and do all this additional work in order to get those funds which were agreed to. So I want to know what that process is and how long that process is going to take, because they've now created some more, what I feel is an added cost, an added bureaucratic costs, which our staff is going to have to incur. I just want to know when that's going to do, because it was more straightforward last year, and now we've got some more hoops to jump through.
Madam President, Commissioner Steve Price, General Counsel for the record. Well, there's so many different things that the legislature's done in terms of specific funding. I think there may be some confusion as to the funds that need to be applied for. In the appropriation, it was very specific that the Ada County Highway District will get $36 million. That's the problem that.
So 36 or 30?
It's 36.
Okay.
It originally was 36.5, so, but that's what was wrong with the appropriation last year is it didn't have the right language, although the intent language was fine. So this year they made sure that on this particular funding source that's being allocated, that we're just waiting for a check. And the deadline for that check is July 1. Yeah, on the other, there's lots of other funding sources. The PED pedestrian and bicycle grant, $10 million. They've got other grants. That takes an application process. A lot of that stuff would go through LTAC, and they would administer, and it's more of a grant program. And our staff is looking at that and how we can make sure that we can get as much of that as we possibly can. Now, in terms of, well, I think that's it.
So there's, Madam President and Mr. Price, there's no application process to ITD to sort of secure these funds. So there was more of a direct appropriation. The governor signed a bill now that, so it's more of a process of moving the funds over from one bank account to another, and there's no intervention by another bureaucratic agency to determine whether and how those funds are going to be moved.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Madam President?
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Then perhaps in an effort not to delay some of this, we could approve items number 3 and 5 and just defer numbers 1. We could approve and then defer items number 1 and 4.
2 and 4.
Yeah, well.
So
Yeah,
we would
approve the interagency agreements and defer the agreements that require cash.
Okay. Okay.
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I apologize, Madam President. To the conversation, I understand, and I can have Diane explain this to you, but there is a condition in these agreements that they both have to be signed because we have to do the NDPS within 7 days after signature. So it's not one or the other going forward. Again, my apology on interrupting. Diane?
Yeah.
Madam President, Commissioners, yes, as part of the interagency agreements, it says we must issue notice to proceed to the consultants within 7 days of that agreement being executed. So it doesn't help us to sign that one. Yeah.
Darn.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarifying, Diane.
Well, I tried.
Thank you. Commissioner McKinney?
Well, I'm inclined to go forward, so long as the notice to proceed for the consultants makes it clear that things could be stopped at some point. And so I would be willing to make a motion to the effect of approving these 4 items.
Okay, just want to clarify. Steve, can we approve this in one motion, or do we need to go through each one?
Good question.
Separate? Okay.
Oh,
Madam
okay.
President.
Commissioner Gold?
So there, as I'm understanding, there's already money that's been allocated in our budget for moving ahead. Is there some, condition that we could put to get an update after this preliminary work? Sounds like the timeline would run into the deadline for us being able to get that check. And then at that point, we could make a decision whether or not to proceed.
Madam President, Commissioner Gold, if you're asking, will the staff be giving you very expeditious updates as to where we are, the answer is yes.
Is that what you were asking? I'm not quite sure I was following either.
We could stop it.
Okay.
So my question is, if today the commission gives the go-ahead to proceed on that preliminary work that you said is going to happen, and we have not gotten the check that we're supposed to be getting, we need to be able to have that information in front of us to make that decision on whether or not to proceed again.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
you know, with that in mind, I worry a whole lot more about stopping work that we have agreed to allow to go forward than, for instance, several weeks ago, we voted on the State Street projects to deny a bid and then make some major changes before anyone got a go-ahead to start spending money. And that's, you know, kind of a horse of a different color. But, you know, I really think we're treading on, you know, hot coals or something else if we tell someone to go ahead, but we can cancel this in 4 months if we want to, if we have to. That's.
And Madam President, I would be inclined to agree with that, especially that we would be allocating money toward this either way to start proceeding, which is part of Commissioner Goldthorpe's concern.
Well, it sounds like people have made up their minds. Let's make a decision.
Madam President and fellow commissioners, I appreciate the need to be very cautious. It sounds like we can't imagine a reason why the funds wouldn't be shifted over. We are meeting with the ITD on the 21st. If we were to defer this to the 26th, which is the meeting that we would have, the regular meeting of April, and then sign it then, or approve them but not sign them, because you have to move on the agreements within 7 days. That would be my only suggestion, rather than 4 months, just basically move it out a few more weeks to get some more assurances that everything's tracking, that technically the legislature's not out of session yet. So who knows what. And maybe that's also part of the concerns that Commissioner Goldthorpe has expressed.
So it sounds pretty close to a motion.
I just want to see what Commissioner Goldthorpe thinks.
Most of my concerns I haven't even expressed. But anyway, my concerns and desires aren't going to change. If we want to defer it until the ITD gives us assurance when they're going to sign a check, I guess that's fine. But I don't think they're going to know when they can sign a check either.
Madam President, we potentially we could defer it until that time and then take it back up again and further the discussion if needed.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay.
Well, so doesn't someone need to make a motion?
I think so.
Sure, I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Okay.
I'd move that we deny a request for approval for item number 2.
And defer.
And defer it until we have received the funding for Highway 16.
Oh, hold on.
And defer it indefinitely.
Oh, you're saying
with
defer.
no date certain.
Steve, do you have something to share?
Thank you, Madam President. My only concern is the word deny. It just defer indefinitely.
Thank you.
That's
Sure.
fine.
I've always relied on you for my grasp of the English language. Thank you.
So Commissioner Goldthorpe has made a motion to defer item number 2 on the regular agenda indefinitely. Is there a second? Okay.
Madam President, I would move that we defer until May the 3rd, our meeting on May, is it May 3rd? Yeah, May 3rd. So we give 1 month.
So the first motion dies for lack of a second. There's been a new motion stated again, Commissioner Hanson.
To defer item number, it's 7 on the consent agenda, but
Number
it's
2 on the regular.
2.
To defer until May 3rd?
May 3rd.
I'll second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? I just want to say I appreciate Commissioner Goldthorpe's and Commissioner Gold's concerns, and if this motion passes, I'll work with staff to get as much of an update as quick as possible so that we can be informed, hopefully before the 3rd. Okay. All those.
That's the baby bit.
Yeah. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. All right, moving on to item number 3, which was previously item number 8, the interagency agreement with Nampa Highway District, District Number 1 for Ustick Road, Owyhee Storm Avenue to Black Cat Road. Is there a motion for this one?
Madam President, I would move that we defer that until May 3rd.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay, no.
Okay. Previously item number 9, now item number 4 on the regular agenda, professional services agreement for Franklin Road, McDermott Road to Black Cat Road. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I would move that we defer that until May 3rd.
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay, no.
Okay. And then last but not least, previously item number 10, currently item number 5 on the regular agenda, interagency agreement with the City of Nampa and the Nampa Highway District, number 1 for Franklin Road, McDermott Road to Black Cat Road.
Madam President, I would move that we defer that until May 3rd.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay, no.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you all. All right. Moving on to public communications. Does any member of the public wish to address the commission?
I do not have anybody signed up.
Thank you, Stacy. So, being there's no further business before the commission, the meeting is adjourned. We're going to have 2 post-commission work sessions. We'll roll right into Amity Road and Locust Road, a presentation by staff with a possible decision. And after this one, we'll have a 5 to 10 minute break. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Madam President, Commissioners, Diane Bevins, Capital Projects Manager. Stacy is handing out a letter we received. You've all received this at the time via email, but just wanted you to have that as well, as it will come up in a few slides later. So I am here to talk about Amity and Locust Grove roundabout and give you an update on our public involvement. Okay, just a little project history. The project did start out as an interim signal project back in FY21. It came in as a request, as these do through our traffic department, and we got into design, and there were a lot of additional right-of-way impacts beyond what we normally see with an interim signal project, that we stopped the design on that and we switched to the ultimate design for an intersection. So we started that in FY22. We completed the traffic analysis, and that's when it was determined it would be a roundabout. And then we did the public involvement this February. And before we get into that, I do want to show you just a little snapshot of the current design. And the north is to the top, just to orient you, because we will be talking about the existing cell tower. And we have a church on the southeast quadrant. So again, we held the public involvement this February from 7th to the 21st. We had a lot of respondents, 395. I think this is the first time ever I've seen more than 50% strongly disagree or disagree. So one of the reasons why we're here to talk to you today. We did have 34% agree or strongly agree. And then the 4 themes that I will be talking about, the City of Meridian did address, basically touched on all of those as well. So that's why I provided that. So the themes are the sidewalk and turn lane for the elementary school that's on the west leg of Amity. We heard roundabouts are unsafe. We heard roundabouts are safe. We get that a lot during design. We get both positive and negative feedback. We heard about the cell tower and that we were being unfair in our right-of-way impacts. And we heard a lot from the city and others that Locust Grove should be 5 lanes instead of 3. So I will go one by one through these themes. The first one being the sidewalk and turn lane at elementary school. So our current design did include an asphalt pathway with a vertical element, but we're hearing from the public and the city, they want to see something more. And so we are going to add in the sidewalk instead of the pathway and the turn lane. So the star is where the elementary school is. And so Locust Grove is on the right-hand side of the screen. Our project goes probably a quarter of the way to the elementary school already. So by the time we widen out to get the turn lane at the school, and then we have to transition back west of the school, we're touching a lot of parcels and a lot of right-of-way. So staff does recommend that we do the complete design of Amity Road between that mile segment. So we can, as we're acquiring right-of-way, there's also a bridge, a culvert that has to be replaced. So it's adding another project to the intersection project. And so we recommend that we do the design. So when we do have to buy right away from these property owners, we're buying for the full build out. And then we can look at how we phase the construction to get the sidewalk and turn lane to the elementary school. So that we've heard the city, we've heard the public, and we will be adding that in to this project. Is there any questions on that item?
Yes.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Madam President, thank you. I know all the people who have been sending us emails and regular mail and calling me a lot. And I'm not sure, because of how wonderfully soft your voice is, that those people listening today to this work session just understood what you just said. So because of that, I would like for us to send this presentation along with an explanation to Kenton Travis so that he can distribute it to the neighborhood. And I don't know how to get it to other people. I need to tell you something that I did while at the beginning of our public input period. I asked the leadership of the LDS church that meets there on that corner if they would send a link to our survey to their members. Now that's a lot of people, and we only got X number of replies, but that is probably the reason that we got that kind of a response to this. I in no way, shape, or form indicated any kind of a prejudice to any of our plans or anything else, other than telling people to dry up and quit complaining about our project managers. But anyway, I actually did that. So I think that might help us to go a long way towards getting this the way all of our partners and the public wants it. There is an incredible, and I don't know that we as a agency realize the magnitude of this. There is an incredible worry on the part of many of the neighbors at the right-of-way impact to the 2 elderly ladies on the west side, one of whom I know really well. And but I think we need to be aware of the physical and health implications of causing this kind of an incursion in their right-of-way, or causing them to have to move their home or move away just for the sake of not moving a stinking cell phone tower. And so.
And Commissioner Gold, if I may, I will get to that on the next few
super,
slides.
thanks.
Yes.
Then I'll stop.
Just clarification though, Diane.
Yes, Madam President.
So the previous plan was a multi-use path that's pavement, asphalt, and now you're recommending it be a concrete sidewalk, but it would still be in the same place as that pathway, or would it be adjacent to the roadway?
Madam President, with going ahead and doing the full design, we would be able to place that facility in its ultimate location and
Okay.
buying the right of way. And then look at how to phase in that turn lane.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Hanson?
Madam President and Diane, thanks. I've always wondered why in Harris Ranch, there's the roundabout that the developer built, where it has two legs with basically have one lane each direction coming into it, and two legs, two lanes in each direction, although we've now adjusted one of those legs. And so they built a roundabout that accommodates that. It looks more like somewhere between a single lane and a double lane roundabout, and it functions very well, but it appears to have a significantly smaller footprint. Why wouldn't there be a design like closer to that? Does it have a smaller footprint, or am I imagining it? It just looks like this has a much bigger footprint than the design that the developer built out in Harris Ranch, which there's no way those two legs are ever going to be expanded. They're homes right up to the edge. And then, of course, the one big leg of Park Center goes over the bridge is 5 lanes, which is now a safety issue because there's a lot of speeding on that leg. But am I wrong in this? And the worst part of their roundabout is they have a free running right turn, which I'm very glad there's not here. We got to not have those on these roundabouts.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I'm not 100% familiar with that roundabout, but this is the same design as you referenced, where we have 2 east-west lanes and only 1 north and southbound lanes within the roundabout.
Mm-hmm.
So, and all of our lanes are standard widths, the setbacks, multi-use pathways. There's engineering standards around the center of the roundabout, so maybe it's an optical illusion. I'm not sure, but I would think if there is a multi-lane roundabout similar to this one, it would be very similar size.
And the cell towers there, Amity is the east-west that is going to be 5 lanes at that segment?
Yes.
Even though it'll taper down to 3 lanes to the east, further to the east. Amity's not going to be 5 lanes
Correct.
all the way through.
I believe east of 5 Mile or even Maple Grove before, it's 3 or 4 miles to the east.
Yeah, because it doesn't go across the canal.
Right.
So it just
before
ends.
it goes back down to 3.
Yeah, it's got a Cloverdale maybe.
Diane, can you explain what the conflict is with the cell tower? So are we having to, the thing is we'd have to move it if this design was approved, or can you explain that?
I will get to that. I
Okay.
have slides for that. If we could just take each point. Thank you. Okay. So we heard a lot of input about the roundabout. We heard it's great, we heard it's not great. We think they're great. So a traffic analysis was completed last January. The multi-lane roundabout and signal operated acceptably for our design year of 2050, but we chose the roundabout because of its proven safety record for all users. The signalized intersection would have been a 4x6, so that has an increased crossing distance for pets and bikes, where now you only have to cross 1 or 2 lanes at a time. And believe it or not, the roundabout has slightly less right-of-way impact. So we did take that all into account when we chose the roundabout for this location. And Locust Grove is a roundabout corridor. We're building the one mile to the north as we speak. At Lake Hazel, 1 mile to the south was just built by a developer through a developer cooperative. And Amity to the east. And further intersections at Cloverdale and 5 Mile will also be roundabouts. So Locust Grove and Amity are roundabout corridors in this area. So now we get to the cell tower. And like we said, we heard the feedback was that we were unfair to the property owners on the west. And we feel like we did a very intentional analysis. We spent a lot of time looking at this design and trying to come up with a design that didn't require the cell tower to be moved, but also didn't require the acquisition of any homes on the west side. So I will address the homes on the next slide, but here just to talk about the cell tower. It is also on private property. It's being leased in this red square. And this is a photo of the cell tower on the right from the street view. I will point out that no matter what design we have, all of the trees that are around that property will have to be removed with the project. The cell tower has been in place for 7 years and was approved through Ada County, which this is not in the city limits yet. It's just a couple more pieces of information there. And then talking about the homes on the west, I don't want to minimize that there are impacts to their property because we are buying right away from them. But we worked, like I said, very intentionally to make sure they had a driveway, that we didn't have to buy their home. And so, we have setbacks. This is the one that's the closest.
That's Nadine Mott's home?
Yes. So
how much of hers are we planning on taking?
We are buying, I think I wrote it down here, about 17 feet, which leaves about 26 feet in her driveway. From the right-of-way line to the garage, and then there's 16 feet before you get to the curb and gutter. So you have
16 feet from her garage door?
No, it's 26 feet from the right-of-way line to her garage. And then an additional 16 feet of right-of-way before you get to the lane, right? So that's 42 feet to navigate pulling in the driveway and pulling out of the driveway. And she also has another shop where the driveways connect as well. So there is opportunity, to back over there, maybe pull forward. So as far as staff is concerned, we felt like we found the best design that balanced the right-of-way needs and didn't require purchasing homes or moving a cell tower.
Madam President.
Commissioner McKinney.
Diane, can I just ask you on this segment, in fact, all of the Locust Grove segment, of course, it's the design is currently showing a 3-lane section. We're designing, the design year is 2050, right? So we're looking at traffic volumes that are projected out to 2050. And I presume then that we're showing that with those traffic volumes, Locust Grove will be adequate with a 3-lane section. But of course, reality can always change a little bit over time. It would seem to be that if we go with this design, of course, we're locked in. You can't make this a 5-lane section. You just don't have the space. You'd have to do more, and likely it would, then fully, completely affect the adjacent properties. So have we thought about, and what's the conclusion about the possibility of a future 5-lane or 4-lane section on Locust Grove and a multi-lane roundabout in its entirety rather than only on 2 legs? And if, for example, 30 years from now, the traffic gets to the point where that's needed, of course, if we did a multi-lane roundabout now, or at least built it such that it could be converted to such for the Locust Grove legs, that would make an easy change in the future, whereas this, of course, would make it much more complicated and expensive to do that. But of course, it would be more expensive now to do that. Can you talk about that for a few moments?
Yes, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, that's the next slide that I was going to talk about, Locust Grove. So every adopted document that we have as staff to work from has Locust Grove as 3 lanes south of Victory Road. The roundabout just to the south at Lake Hazel was also built. It's the exact same design. So it has the 2 lanes entering the roundabout from Locust Grove and 4, for Lake Hazel. So we did not consider Locust Grove at 5 lanes because we don't have any basis for that. We did the traffic analysis for the intersection, and the intersection will function through 2050. Locust Grove changing from 3 to 5 lanes is a bigger discussion that would have to come through our CIP or master street map. So Locust Grove is held at 3 lanes in our CIP, in our master street map, and all the modeling takes that into account. All the right-of-way, and this, at least the segment to the north, is mostly developed, and it's residential, and we preserved it for 3 lanes. So, and we want traffic to go on Eagle Road to the east, which is 5 lanes, and State Highway 69 to the west, which is 5 now, and potentially more in the future. So that's why we've held Locust Grove as 3 lanes throughout the years through CIP and Master Street Map for those reasons, and it's the only documents we have to, you know, design a project is what's been adopted.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay, and I think that makes sense. Looking at this slide, that diagram in the lower right, is that showing the traffic volumes on the different segments nearby? Is that what we're looking at?
No, that's just a screenshot from the showing you that the segments are in the CIP, and then on a screenshot from the Master Street Map.
So those aren't traffic volume numbers?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, that makes sense, since Locust Grove is midway between Eagle Road and Meridian Road, and it's a major arterial, so staying with the 3-lane section on Locust Grove, that's the reason that we're doing that. Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Go for it. Oh, Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, Madam President and Diane, so this has to do with, we're not limiting out on that driveway. Is that because you gotta have that raised, that red area is raised, right? So it's right in, right out. Are we providing additional access off of Amity? This is the Locust Grove access point. It's shown property that abuts Amity, so that.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I'm not sure if she owns the parcel to the south, but the roundabout is right there. So you take a right, go around the roundabout and head north, if that's.
She owns the whole corner.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
She owns the whole
what my
corner.
question
But
was.
okay. Yeah. Okay, so you head north and then you have to turn around and come back south and get on the property. That obviously diminishes the future value of this property for future. So does she get compensated for turning what would be a full access into a
Madam President,
limited
Commissioner Hanson, we do
access?
not compensate.
We don't compensate
that,
for
no.
limiting access.
No.
Okay. Continue. Thanks, Diane.
So just in summary and to be clear on how we plan to move forward, we will add the ped connectivity and the turn lane at the school. We will continue with the roundabout design as we feel that that's the safest option for all users. And as I mentioned, Locust Grove and Amity are turning into be, roundabout corridors. We do get a lot of negative comments about roundabouts during design. And then we hear positive comments after they're built, or we just hear nothing, which we always take nothing as positive feedback. We do not plan to move the cell tower. There would be a lot involved into moving a utility like that with, finding the land, going through the permitting process again. And at this time, we can safely say it would be upwards of $1 million, if not more, to move the cell tower. And then following all adopted documents, we will be moving forward with the design with Locust Grove at 3 lanes. We are sensitive to Meridian's concerns that they've expressed in the letter. We do understand the growth in the area and out in CUNA, but for the reasons we just talked about on the previous slide, we think it's important to keep Locust Grove at 3 lanes at this time. So I will
Thanks, Diane.
go over, I guess, just really quick, next steps, and then we plan on proceeding with the design, which will go into FY24. And because we're adding this additional work up towards the elementary school, we will do additional public involvement. And then right away in construction, timelines and years will be worked out through the integrated 5-year work plan. So.
Okay, Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, two things. When is our next scheduled public involvement or public hearing for this project?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldberg, we don't have that scheduled yet. We've paused, we just finished it in February. We're pausing to come back because of all the comments we received and the letter from the city. And then once if we proceed with design, then we'll schedule that next public involvement.
Two things. I think we need to have a public meeting on this during this calendar year. And I think we should, trying to remember his last name, Dave, he's the new deputy superintendent at the school district. Dave Reinhardt, I believe it is. He came from the CUNA school district, and ask him and maybe support his efforts to have a pathway put from the elementary school south to the developments south so that kids would have the ability to move across the Simplot property there to the school. I know that hasn't been done, and I think Simplots might want to be a good neighbor, and I know they have no plans for that property currently, and I think that would be an important step in the right direction for us to work with the neighbors, the school district, and the kids. One of the claims that I heard from someone who's a retired administrator with the school district who lives on Amity right there is that if we put the sidewalk in, the kids will lose all their busing. And so that's also a concern.
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, we waited to send out the letter from the public involvement until we had this meeting. So a letter will go out to all the people that commented and signed up, and we'll get a follow-up on these items.
So, Diane, normally, when you guys share the feedback that we receive from the public, there's typically a little bit more details in terms of the 50% agree or disagree, and it can be kind of clustered by elements of the project. Do you have that type of analysis for us? Like, if the majority of those folks that disagreed or strongly agreed, was it directly linked to the fact that it was a roundabout, or were there specific pieces of the design that led them to strongly disagree or disagree with it entirely?
Madam President, it's the 4 items we're discussing today were the main themes of disagreement about the project.
I guess what I would like to know more is what percentage of those themes. And so out of any of them, yeah, that's, I want more detail, I think, about that for the next time. Just because that, I feel a little uncomfortable. I feel comfortable with what the next steps that you've outlined here, but to echo Commissioner Goldthorpe's point, I think we need, a meeting, public hearing this year, with really clear analytics around what those disagreements were, how we've addressed them, and additional opportunities for that comment, just so we can have that all phased out, if that makes sense. Commissioner McKinney?
Diane, just a couple of final questions. If we could go back to that slide that shows the picture of the current design. Yeah, there we go. Now, and I just wanted to ask about the pedestrian connectivity issue. It looks like this design is showing multi-use pathways immediately adjacent to the curb throughout all segments of the intersection. Is that correct, or is there a buffer?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, there is a buffer.
There's no buffer.
There is a buffer.
There is a buffer.
Yes.
Okay. So is the intent with respect to the school so this multi-use pathway that I'm seeing on the north side of Amity, is it the intention to just simply extend that up to the elementary school? Is that the idea with the extension of the project? Would it include curb gutter and complete road rebuilding, or just the pathway itself?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I think the feedback we heard was that the public wanted curb gutter and sidewalk, and not just a pathway with a vertical element. So we would be looking at that And when I reference the phased construction, is maybe we can widen to the north side, get that curb gutter and sidewalk in the ultimate location, and then also construct the turn lane, which is adding an additional lane to the school. But I think we want that to be open for a discussion and having the option to go ahead and build the 5 lanes up to the school, or even to stay Highway 69. And that would happen with the commission through budgets and integrated 5-year work plan discussions. Just because if we're out there, we're doing a lot, adding pavement, doing a lot of construction work, going at least half a mile, if not more, to the school and tapering back, it may make more financial sense, and to not disrupt this area more than once, just to build the ultimate 5 lanes with that project. So
Okay.
that's where we're at right now.
Okay, good. All right, well, let me just say, all things considered, I think you've done a pretty good job of laying out a design that, deals pretty well with the complexities of this area. So I think you've done a pretty good job, so thank you.
So, Madam President, I do want some clarification because typically after public involvement on a capital project, it doesn't come back for a public hearing to the commission for direction. So this is labeled as a action item. I'm here today to say this is how we're moving forward. If the commission wants to provide a different direction, I'm happy to take that into account, but I'm a little confused on if we go forward with design, it's based on my presentation today and not, so if there's still some questions about the 4 areas.
Yeah, I have questions, but it looks like Justin's gonna come up and say something.
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Justin Lucas, Deputy Director of Planning and Projects here at the Highway District. I appreciate the question from Diane, and as I was listening there, it seems to me, and I'm just going to summarize where I think you want us to go, just so we have clarity here. Based on the direction that I've heard today, we will re-engage the public on our path forward. We will not move forward with full design, 100% full speed ahead, which I think is what Diane was referencing. I think we need to go back to the public on this, reach out to them, let them know our intention. There may be some design work associated with that, but it feels like we need to kind of re-engage there and then come back to you one more time with further information and feedback and outreach, and then we'll go from there. I think that's where we've landed.
I think we need to also have a public meeting.
And Madam President, Commissioner, when you're referencing a public meeting, you would like an opportunity for the public to come in this format, a commission format, to be able to testify on the project?
Yes.
Okay, and if that's the intent of the commission, as I say, as Diane mentioned, that's atypical, but we've done it and we can provide it in this scenario, if that's what the direction is.
Thank you, Justin, and I think that's exactly what I was thinking. And the reason for that, Diane, is I think I agree. At the topic, high level, I feel like, yes, this design looks, we've seen these before, all of that. But what's giving me such a big pause is the 58% that are strongly disagreeing. That feels really uncomfortable to me. So I think having that opportunity to go back out to the public to share, hey, this is what we're doing, we heard you, we're making these adjustments, and then seeing then how does that impact that approval? Did we hit the mark where we could make a difference, right, to adjust that? That's really what I'm looking for, because I really just want this project to resonate and fit, and we have that opportunity to make it the best it can be with that public involvement. So I think what you have here is great. It's just, I want to have a little bit more time to process what we have here and make sure that it is the right design, or we're not missing anything. Commissioner Hanson, did you?
Madam President and Diane, I would agree. Commissioner Goldthorpe's brought over concerns that have been raised with regard to how people are going to live with this, their school, their church, their homes. And since they're going to live with it, it's really, really important that we get it right and that they really understand. And, you know, nothing's final until we actually agree it's 100% final. And so I see this as a draft proposed design, and that they do continue to have some input into this until we say it's final. So I really appreciate Commissioner Goldthorpe insisting that we bring this back and have that public input, because they need to own it and appreciate that it's their roundabout. It's the roundabout for their church and their school. And, you know, it's the complexity of that area where they don't have much connectivity and won't have much connectivity other than perhaps a mid-mile collector. So there will be a lot more traffic on these roads. And that they need to understand how they're going to be grappling with that. And the movement of that traffic through a roundabout helps to slow it down, at least at that point. And I think that more people will appreciate that, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President.
Okay, Commissioner Goldthorpe.
I also have one final suggestion, and it's because of how surprised I was, as I guess you were, at the number of responses we got to the survey invitation. Perhaps as we go forward as an agency, when we're doing projects that come so close to either schools or churches, that perhaps we contact their leadership and ask their leadership to put out the link to our survey, because, you know, as you know, and as we've begun to get a really great reputation for our outreach is absolutely stellar. And I think it could actually, just because of what we've seen today, it could actually be easily improved just a little bit more.
And Madam President, I do want to point out that Stiles Clark is the project manager. So in a few months, if this comes back, he may be presenting, or I would. I just want to point that out. And he's our newest project manager. This project has seen a lot of project managers. So,
Welcome. Thanks for being here. So Diane, is there anything else you need from us?
no, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's convene at 1:20, and we're gonna meet down at the bottom for our next work session. Thanks all.
Thank you. I have spent a lot of time on this one.
Test. All right. It's not on. The mics aren't on. Test. Test 1. It's on. Does that work better? No. Test 1. Test, no. All righty. All right. Do you think they're the jacks or do you think it's the microphone? All right. No. Test 1. There we are.
To our second work session item on access management.
Our policy.
Thank you, Stacy. So again, I know I've talked about this previously, but just to kind of set the tone for today, this is just a really good foundational presentation by staff. We're not going to necessarily going over specific policy today, but I hope that this conversation and questions that come about can inform how we want to change or update the policy. we do have some lovely guests from the city of Boise.
And Meridian.
And Meridian. Oh, there you are. Sorry, I had my two persons. Sorry, my apologies. So we have representation from 2 out of the 6 cities. And we want an opportunity, we welcome the opportunity for you to provide input about what we shared today, where you're seeing those conflicts, provide a little additional context and details, and we can have that discussion. So with that, any questions before we turn it over to Christy? Okay, let's go for it. Ken, do you have a presentation up for us?
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. Christy Little, Development Services Manager. Sean and Ryan and I have worked on this presentation, but Ryan was going to give it and had to leave, so you get me with 0 preparation. So I'm going to apologize in advance, but it's all great. So we just wanted to start off with what is access management, and I mean, straight out of our policy, it's where and how driveways and street connections intersect our roadways. And depending on the classification of the roadway, you know, on a local street, there's more access. On an arterial, there's less access. And the benefits of access management: it improves safety for all users, improve mobility for all users, and may it also provide more vertical elements. You can see with the number of driveway conflicts, especially in high pedestrian, high bicycle areas, access management can be really beneficial as there's fewer turning potential, more visibility. Back in the day, we worked with the city of Boise and Meridian and property and business owners on the Fairview Avenue corridor management strategy. We spent a good deal of time working through this. Some of you may recall we had business coalitions. We looked at, had lots of workshop type meetings with business owners and looked at impacts on property values, impacts on safety. One thing that did come out of that strategy review is that we do see that increasing access management on some roadways like Fairview could have the potential to increase driver speeds. I want to go back to this one, for those of you who weren't involved at the time. The management strategy looked at backage roads, looked at shared driveways, looked at how even if you take current development out of the picture, just looking at the existing situation, how business owners might work together to combine driveways, how we could work with the land use agencies to establish some, even if not public, but some shared drive aisles that would parallel Fairview. And really, at the end of the day, the business owners, we didn't have their support, and they preferred their individual driveways.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
If I remember right, and I know you'll tell me if I am or not, when we were all through with this and all through with the bit of a brouhaha in 2015, we made an assignment to the 2,000 or whatever business owners there to see if they could help come up with a solution for access management. And to my knowledge, nothing happened.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add to that. I mean, when we had the work session with the city of Boise and that the crash data map there, not to overemphasize Fairview, but I feel like that, the access management piece is obviously has a role in contributing to the high crashes that are happening, right? And so it's interesting that, obviously more access management can help things, but obviously not in some instances, different types of conflicts, and it's tricky, so.
Yeah, we've got a slide later on here that might get to that.
Thank you.
Linder and Orchard. Sean, are you familiar with this one?
It's still Fairview.
Fairview, thank you. So this goes back to, this is still part of that Fairview Avenue access management. So we looked at the 450 access points, and this, President Pickering, goes to your point about the number of crashes. 1 out of every 4 crashes that was looked at in that study happened at driveways or unsignalized intersections. And there was a high number of bicycle and pedestrian crashes along that corridor too. Sean, you would say that number is high, right?
Yes.
This is an interesting statistic here that drivers would pass on average 1 access point every 2 seconds on this stretch of Fairview. So in ACHD, our policy manual, section 7202, we do have minimum separation requirements for streets and for driveways, and those vary depending on the classification of the street. And these are where you see where we quantify those. So on minor arterials, we like collectors to be at the 1/4 mile, full signals at the 1/2 mile. We don't have many of these opportunities left in the county, but where we were able to apply, these actually worked out this policy seems to work really well. It actually forced developers to provide better interconnectivity within their large sites and to work with adjacent property owners. And then on collectors, we do have local streets with 330-foot minimum separation. Driveway locations on collectors depends on the speed and the land use. Driveways on minor arterials and principal arterials are also based on speed. Our policy encourages, but does not require cross-access easements and shared access. We rely on the land use agencies to place that requirement, and we will suggest when they might do that. Our policy allows for temporary full access. So on 2-lane roadways that are maybe in our 5-year plan or in our CIP with low volumes, maybe the proposed driveway doesn't meet the requirement for spacing. If depending on volume and other factors, we do allow temporary full access driveways to be implemented instead of restricting them right away. Of course, our policy supports connectivity and extension of stub streets and directing access to lower classified roadways. So our policy, as it reads, is if you have access on 2 different roadway classifications or frontage on 2 different roadways, so maybe a minor arterial and a collector, policy requires you to take access to the collector.
Madam President, I'm remembering again, about that same time we were discussing this, we had a couple of opportunities to change our plans from limiting access to temporary full access. They both involved Jackson's stores, one at Franklin and Linder and the other one at Linder and Deer Flat. I don't know if anybody but remembers that, but I do remember telling him it might just be temporary.
Just a little bit so folks can hear you online. Just speak up a little louder.
Wow. And
Sorry to interrupt you mid-thought.
No, it's okay. I'm usually thinking I'm the only one that speaks from my diaphragm, so I'm surprised. Sorry. You don't want me to repeat myself, do you?
Go for it.
Uh-oh. Okay, I was remembering back in 2015, probably the first two times that I remember that we changed from restricting access to going to a temporary full access. Linder and Franklin in Meridian and Linder and Deer Flat in Cuna, both involving strip type business area and the Jackson store. And seems to be working really well for now.
Glad to hear it. I want to give some examples of some access management concerns that have come up over the last couple of years. I know we've all talked about this one in the last policy discussion. You'll recall the Ovation Building downtown Boise, and the developer had designed the project in accordance with ACHD access management policies And the city had designated Broad Street as a festival street, and there had been a kind of, a gap or a lapse in notification to the parties about that. So in the end, we did work with the city and the developer, and they redesigned their site. But this was an example of our policy about taking access to the lesser classified street. So this is a good example of something that turned out okay. It just took us a while to get there. But while we're talking about downtown Boise, I do want to point out that we don't have policy. Our policy isn't written for downtowns, and we don't apply our dimensional standards that are in our policy to downtown areas. We know that there's short block lengths, there's alleys. Really, when we're looking at access in a downtown area, we're looking at, what streets have bike lanes, what streets don't, where is the safest place for all users to put a driveway. We're not applying dimensional standards. So that flexibility is already built into our policies. In this case, had we known going into the application that Broad Street was a festival street, we probably wouldn't have had any issues. Our staff would have worked with that. Another current example out here in the Warm Springs area is Atwell Place. The developer followed our policy manual again, extending a stub street and not proposing access to Warm Springs. Neighbors were concerned about amount of traffic that might be going through their neighborhood with an extension, so the applicant redesigned their site a little bit, and during the middle of that, our reclassification of Warm Springs occurred, and it met our policy. But here's a good Fairview Avenue example. You can see they've got a local commercial street, and here's the Fairview frontage. And so they've got all of these driveways on Fairview, and they've got all of these driveways on the local street. And, what can we do? This is an example of where we would like to go. What can we do to, eliminate some of these driveways so that we're sharing driveways between businesses, or in some cases even just one business, and how to better utilize with land use context these local streets. I mean, in this case, there's no front on housing here. This is mostly industrial. This would be a really great opportunity for us to access the local street and not Fairview. So for just our policy considerations from staff, we feel that our current dimensional standards, those policies seem to be working really well from all aspects. But the one revision that we would like to potentially look at with the commission kind of goes back to this what's the functional classification of the roadway? Here at providing a little more flexibility to our staff within this policy section, so that if a property does have frontage on more than one street, access, as it's written, access shall be taken to the lesser classified street. We would like to just make it clear that the supervisor of, which in this case would be Mindy and her team, that they can approve a waiver of this policy after consultation with the land use agency. As it's written now, any of these have to come to the commission. Our staff is, they've got enough experience and expertise in this area and can work with the land use agencies and their staff. And we really see this as a quick win. Additionally, other tools that we can look at, intersection medians, which that's kind of where we landed on the Fairview Avenue corridor, is that as we improve intersections on Fairview, we'll also install medians to limit some of those driveways close to the intersection that might not be in the best location. We haven't really constructed mid-block medians with too many of our capital projects, but that's another tool to restrict access in places where we need to break up the corridor. Right in, right out barriers can be challenging. Sometimes that might mean just a bit of a concrete curb. But if we're looking a little more forward thinking with vertical design elements, how can we incorporate those into access management tools? Again, the frontage and backage roads, this takes a lot of coordination with the cities and their implementation of their policies, lots of work with property owners, but there is a great value in using them where we can get them. And then same with alleys. How can we rely on alleys more for access in the right spot? Sean's team in traffic has identified a high accident location associated with access management. So out here on Federal Way at the Fred Meyer, Home Depot, Zamzow's location, you can see the red dots here. We've got, well, first let's review the access. So we've got a public street here with multiple driveways. We've got a public street here with a main drive aisle. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 driveways that serve that whole area. Zamzow's is a separate property owner. Everything else comes underneath the shopping center. But Sean's team identified that we've got some very high accident locations associated with the driveways. And if you can't tell from right here, that makes it pretty clear that we've got some accidents happening associated with left turn movements. Right here.
Madam President, those are mostly property damage wrecks, not life-threatening, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And then you come down to this next driveway, you can see the same thing. We've got accidents happening here due to turning movements. Let's see if we have a... so Sean's team is actually proposing, through our rapid project implementation team, is proposing to design some medians in this area that would limit these driveways to right in, right out, to help improve the safety of users to this commercial area. Anything else you want to say about that, Sean?
We are looking, I mean, we could look to, left in, right out. Most of the accidents that are occurring are mostly having to do with left out, not necessarily the left ends. So that is another option we could look at, is providing some left in opportunities, but restricting the left out. Those are really, where you see all those red dots, that's where a lot of those are happening.
That's the way it was on Fairview too, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So challenges to access management and our access management policy. A lot of the driveways, I hate to use Fairview, but it's a corridor that everybody knows, but and all over the county on arterials, there are commercial properties with very limited frontage, less than 100 feet. And so they can't meet a dimensional standard from anywhere. We do have to allow access, and we do, when we get those development applications, we do work with our traffic engineers to determine where is the best location for that very limited site. But it does make it difficult on these big corridors where there are just multiple parcels, and we have to grant them access when they come in and develop. U-turn opportunities, these are certainly helpful when we're dealing with these corridors with multiple driveways, and maybe we need to come in and restrict driveways with medians. The more U-turn opportunities we provide to our users, the better. We can't just convert all of our intersections to U-turn operations today, but as we move forward with projects, we should certainly be evaluating those. Yeah, not everybody likes medians. We know that. And people don't like their driveways restricted. And we do have to balance those interests between private property owners, between business owners. In some instances, people feel that more access actually creates friction, which slows people down. But we've got a limited amount of data that supports that. But on the other hand, we've got the safety associated with the multiple access. Truly is a balance, and the more tools we have, the better. So as far as from our staff thoughts, we feel that in general, 7202 works really well. We received a lot of pushback from the development community about 8 years ago when we tightened our policies, our dimensional standards, and we told them that we would be flexible and we would make things work, and we excelled at that. I don't hear a lot of developers too concerned about dimensional standards. They certainly are understanding the benefits and the need for access management. But we would like to provide flexibility to staff at the lowest level so that we can work on that section where we're talking about providing access at the lowest classified street. And we recognize that that's not always the case. We may have a project on a local street and a collector street, and maybe that local street serves a school. We probably don't want to put more vehicle trips on that street and would want access on the collector. So that's the type of flexibility we would like with that. We want to be able to make that more land use sensitive and work with land use agencies on particularly on that policy as we get development applications.
And before you go in, so I just want to highlight too, Christy, that I think, and the reason why I wanted to have this discussion first is the vertical elements like you talked about, which includes, tree canopy, medians, all these other tools, right? Like that, this access management policy connects to these other elements, and when we look at it holistically, can make an entire corridor safer, right? So my vision really isn't that access management, oh yeah, we solved it all, right? This is going to make everything safer. It's this plus these other pieces that we're going to talk about and consider, but this feels like a really important first step in this conversation because we know that there's tension with access management currently, that it can be tweaked a little bit. So with that, Commissioner Goldthorpe, did you have something?
I remember what you talked about with the developers 8 years ago, and I don't remember almost a single incident when we had anything major come before us about that, except for the one there on Broad Street, which was, again, unfortunate. But so the flexibility that you have and want seems to me is working really well.
If I may, just a quick question. I'm thinking of that image you showed us on Fairview Avenue, where you've got a row of businesses. They've all got frontage access from Fairview and also from the commercial street that's behind them. We've talked mostly in terms of how our policy works with new access requests and new developments and so on. What, if anything, can be done in a situation like this where it's already existing? Because I would imagine from a legal standpoint, it's very difficult to come along to an existing business that has a certain access and say, oh, we're going to close this off and make you share access with adjacent business owners. Is there any kind of a precedent? What has been done in those kinds of situations, or has anything like that ever happened? And if so, how?
Sure. So that was kind of the impetus of the Fairview Avenue access management strategies. And the concept sounds great and everybody loves it until they have to start looking at giving up one of their driveways. But for ACHD capital projects, we don't take away any access point. We can restrict access, and that can be done with medians. Typically, that's what you would see. And typically, in the past, we've only really used medians with intersection designs. But the law says we have to provide reasonable access. And so when we come in with an ACHD capital project, that's what we're doing. We're making sure they have reasonable access, but we're not taking away driveways.
But Christy, I have an additional question to that point, Commissioner McKinney. So say one of these buildings is redeveloped and remodeled. Is that a condition of approval by the city, can they say, hey, you're gonna vacate this entry from Fairview and you leverage this piece? Is that a part of also that conversation?
Yes, President Pickering, that can be also a part of that conversation. Mhm.
So in general, though, what we can do, I would imagine that restrictions on access could be, for example, the width of an access might be changed. And then medians that could make a right-in, right-out restriction. And that's about all you can do unless individual property owners want to agree to something else, but it's in their court, they have control, right?
That's
And,
correct.
you know, business owners always want, well, typically always want as much access as possible. They would prefer to have, you know, no restrictions at all, let anyone come in off the road, but of course, that's the challenge that we're facing.
Madam President, again, with the Fairview situation, that's pretty much what wound up happening was, you know, instead of putting a median in from Orchard all the way to, in Boise to Linder in Meridian, which was, you know, the original plan, we've been doing things like this, and with our intersections, we put much more robust medians in, which has worked really well for the intersection management. And if I remember right, there was really only one fatality on Fairview, and I think that's about all they have now still. And that had involved alcohol. So, you know, basically we're looking at property damage collisions, and which might increase if you just reduce the access points because of the possibility of higher speeds, but the restrictions to ride in, ride out, and partial medians and things like that, I think are, you know, based on what the city and what we want, are probably pretty good solutions to at least experiment with.
Thanks, Christy. So I want to turn it over to the cities. Is there anything you'd like to add? Are there specific examples that you think you'd like to provide? Yeah, welcome, Bree. And because obviously we have a few here, but are there additional examples that we should consider talking about?
Sure, thank you. Bree Brush, City of Boise Mayor's Office. I'll apologize on behalf of Council President Wooding. She wanted to be here, but she had a family emergency just before this. So just filling in today to share some comments, and luckily Christy shared almost exclusively Boise examples. So I don't have a whole lot to add other than maybe a suggestion for the access policy when two frontage options are available. You might think of incorporating bikeway classification. You have street classification represented, but you also have a robust network of low stress, high stress, medium stress bikeways. So if that can be tied into access management policy at all, I think that would be a worthwhile consideration. But really liked the suggestion that was here earlier. And then additionally, to the extent this is possible in your policy manual, I don't know, but you might be able to think about a suite of access management tools, like a toolbox, and how they can be applied differently in different neighborhood contexts. So our transportation action plan at the City of Boise identifies the different areas as downtown, mixed-use corridors, suburban neighborhoods, and then compact neighborhoods. If there was ever a dream situation where access management policies could be tailored to each of those different areas, especially downtown, I think it would be really interesting to consider, because as we all know, a median doesn't function the same way in a mixed-use corridor like Fairview as it would in a neighborhood or suburban corridor. But I really appreciate you inviting us to be here today, and the suggestions that are already shown are really exciting, so thank you.
Questions? Go for it.
Well, thanks, Bree. I totally agree with you, and every one of those examples illustrates how, as the city, when someone wants to redevelop one of these parcels, you have this whole basket full of options. The developer's coming to you asking for permission to do certain things, to change certain things, so you have some leverage. ACHD doesn't, and yet we have this shall policy that applies, you know, the lesser typology in every context. If the developer happens to agree with that, then you you're left out, which is completely inappropriate, and that was the case on the Sixth and Broad issue. We went through this whole sort of like farce of the city didn't have standing because ACHD's policy and the developer were in agreement of how they wanted to do it, and yet the city should have been able to say, you have all of these other things you're requiring of that development, and yet you couldn't require them to take access where you wanted them to take access, which was crazy. I think we do exactly like you say. We say the city determines access, and that our guidance is, with respect to arterials, that you take it off of a lesser typology. We go through a process to say this is why this would work better, but the city has, and then the city has the ability to say, okay, I want to close up this driveway, and look, ACHD is going to back us up because it'll take access off a lesser typology. If you want this conditional use permit, this is how we're going to do it. And we would not have had this issue with Broad Street. We wouldn't have had this issue with Atwell because the city would have said, you know, yeah, Warm Springs is an arterial, but it basically functions as a collector. There are no collectors. It goes from arterial to local. So there wasn't really the hierarchy there. So the city understood every single context. It's very different. So it seems to me that if we're going to go to add some flexibility, we just simply say, you understand the context. Access should be primarily determined by the land use agency with respect to access, the access policy. And then we can give some guidance. And then those areas where there's really bad connectivity, we're going to run into these areas. But areas where there's good connectivity, then there's more options. So I think we need to go much further based on how you've described it. Yeah, you have multiple zones, types of examples, and I've never seen two that have been alike. Every context is unique, and so it really needs to be the land use agency that determines access.
Any other questions for Bree? Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Yes. Welcome.
Brian McClure, City of Meridian Community Development. Thank you for having me here today. I'll echo some of what Bree said. I appreciated the slides, and we do think ACHD works well with us for the most part. One thing that Meridian has noticed is we do see more conditions that are related, and our request as part of this process would be to have more specific examples of what specific policies might come into play for any given type of project, particularly with the larger ones. So if you're a large commercial project or a large residential project and you have access to, you know, an arterial collector or local, whatever that may be, but to be more specific in some of those conditions when ACHD will enforce the policy or policies and not leaving it so open-ended. That'd be one. The second one is, and some of you may recall that the most recent Fairview Access Management Plan was the latest. There's been several previous. You know, from the city's perspective, taking the long view, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. You know, we supported our business and we didn't necessarily want to be aggressive and overbearing, but there's a lot of value in long-term planning for things that the city can do if ACHD first acts on something like that. On Fairview Avenue, as an example, Jewel, over close to Fairview, behind D&B. You know, we have a local road back there that the city really wanted to see expanded as a backage road. Approving that plan would have made getting a backage road a lot easier because it was identified in there, and the city through all sorts of, you know, we have a lot more strength as you mentioned, Commissioner, CCCs, just smaller projects, design reviews, to get those things, and we can be a heavy in condition when ACHD has said, yes, we need this thing, this is the vision, and the city can then say, ACHD's identified this, we feel like we have some support, and then we can move forward with that as development occurs over time, not necessarily something out the gate where we make these huge changes.
So Brian, just for clarification, so having more specific plans about what we want to restrict or what we hope moving forward would restrict, is that what you're saying would help the city?
Sure, that's a great example, Commissioner. So, you know, this is a corridor where we want to see access management a little bit more visioned. It doesn't have to be specific, but this is an important corridor. And these are some of the tools that we'd like to see implemented here. Some of those tools could in fact be on the city, but having ACHD, the transportation agency, identify, what that vision is, the city's able to support that a lot more easily, understanding that we're in alignment.
So, yeah, and I think Fairview is a great example because every single block of Fairview is different. It was probably thought of, well, this is a mobility corridor because it's critical. It's a movement of a lot of traffic east-west. And yet both City of Boise and the City of Meridian allowed development to take place. It's not their fault that they didn't have enough foresight, but with multiple access points. They basically took every little lot and said, okay, 10-year access point. And so as they were being redeveloped, that was never addressed. So it turned, instead of a road that provided movement, travel times for over long distances, it turned into a strode, which is kind of trying to function as a road, trying to function as a street, and doing neither well. And so it seems to me that the entity that has the authority over land use needs to say, okay, this is how we want to kind of move closer to getting this section to be more like a road than like a street. And so then we have the authority to do it. We want to do this. And then ACHD says, yeah, we are backing you up on this because what we're seeing is kind of fender benders or crashes. And it's clearly not safe for pedestrians either. But I think the differences of opinion may be over who's in the driver's seat. I think the cities have to be in the driver's seat because they control how land is redeveloped. And in all of these areas, all the examples we've got, they've already been developed. So it's a redevelopment opportunity. And then we need to say, okay, this is how the city wants to see this change. They want to see this turn closer into a mobility corridor, as perhaps we should have done the first time. A little like ITD has learned from Eagle Road, and they're building 16 because Eagle Road doesn't really function as well that 16 will be as a mobility corridor. So that's what I think. So if our policies make it clear, the planning and a shift of these different, especially on these arterials, and frankly, I'd say with respect to access, we just don't apply this to local roads, local and collector roads. That's not really relevant. Just however the city wants to make the land use function, and it seems to be a much easier approach. Then you'd be able to plan better.
Brian, so be really blunt with that type of flexibility and just focusing on arterials and leaving local and collectors up to the city and having you be in the driver's seat about that access, is that something that the city would welcome? Or because I feel like there's kind of these two different thoughts here. Is ACHD has vision and this suite of tools, right? And we have these clear things that we can do to meet the needs of the communities that we're serving together, versus having the city say, no, we want you, ACHD, to do these things that are in line with our vision. So it feels like we're talking about two different things almost.
Commissioner, so you told me to be blunt.
Yes.
I will say this is personal opinion. I don't know that we've had a conversation that's robust as this among staff at Meridian, but I think like most things, there's a nice in-between rather than an extreme on either end. Typically, the concern I think that I've seen and that I know our staff have expressed historically, when ACHD doesn't have a stance, we typically fall on our faces. Probably on video right now. It's hard for a land use agency to enforce transportation policies, particularly when there's a lot of details and specific context behind them, without having a little bit of support. It's really awkward, especially when the city says one thing and then ACHD doesn't require something else or says something else, and that has happened. So being in alignment, I think, has a lot of value, even if it's not necessarily a strong stance. And I do still think there's value in having a vision, even if it's done together or is a little softer. The master street map is a perfect example of that. And the city would, and this was one of our other recommendations, the city would actually prefer in some cases to see local roads on there. That way the city it's easier for us to say, this is part of the vision. Just to beat up Fairview, we want Fairview to see reduced access points. the local road, you know, typically for non-commercial projects, is how we're going to enforce that. And so it's easier for us to say, developer, you're going to have this, and we're willing to say that because we know we're in alignment with the transportation agency when we do that.
Commissioner McKay.
Would it be your opinion that perhaps our standards ought to have some a greater quantity of specific default rules? Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Commissioner, I think the way Bree mentioned it before, a suite of tools might be a good way of saying that. I know there's specific examples that we see, and I know to other commissioner points that they can vary quite a bit. You know, that's very true. But I think different types of projects, different types of size, you know, it's not just a TIS or nothing. Really sort of could help the city plan and enforce access management better if there were more specific examples or more defined suites of tools to sort of get there.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds like in part you're saying specific examples, more detailed default rules. At the same time, more like instead when you're talking about tools, you're talking about saying here's the way these things are to be analyzed to get to the end result of how much access, where, what spacing, and so on. Is that what you're saying?
Commissioner, I'm not sure I'm totally tracking that. You know, an example might be, and I think the city has actually done a really good job. I don't know how much of this ACHD sees, but on Overland, Franklin, Fairview, we've gotten a lot of easements for cross-access requirements. And while we can't do a lot now, we have a setup someday coming where we'll be able to do that better. I think where we have issues sometimes, and maybe some more examples would help, would be large greenfield projects. We see a lot that request right in, right out, full access, whatever it is. I won't name names here. And I know that ACHD staff in the city aren't always in alignment. The city would like to say, no, you're going to take access off the collector and then internal drive aisles, not the arterial roadway. But we don't always end up on the same page there, and that's where we as a city probably fail to fully enforce the vision. Having more examples as to, you know, in these sorts of cases, commercial, greenfield, access when a collector and local drive aisles is available is looked poorly upon. Thank you.
Okay. So the rest is up to, I mean, I feel like that was really helpful. Thank you both for coming. Thanks for your questions, commissioners. So, I'll be working with staff to incorporate some of these thoughts and feedback. If you guys have any other suggestions, please reach out. Happy to talk more about that. And I think I'll have a good sense of what's next after we kind of get our bearings from today. But with that, do you have something to share, Commissioner Hanson?
Well, you know, what I really appreciated about 2 or 3 years ago, I suggested some speed management policies, and Christy Little gave me some good input. She gave me some good input. I've gotten 0 input from staff on the suggestions I've made on this, and I like it.
Okay.
I'd like some input on this because it speaks to, I think, some of the things I've talked about.
And what type of input are you saying?
Sort of, when we're talking about a policy that says we have to have a shared vision about what these corridors are going to do. Fairview, for example, this doesn't function either as a mobility corridor or a street that people can use multimodal. So we don't get it. So we have to figure out a process in our policies so that we are consistent and support each other, land use agencies and the ACHD on the vision and what that means, and then not to tend to have a flexibility for as on a case-by-case basis as they come up, so that we can move. I think some of these, you know, it's very different. It's a very different context. In Boise, because of its zoning approach, they recognize we can't have the kind of one-size-fits-all for all these contexts. So we're going to add more flexibility in the way we describe multi-use. I think that's the same kind of thing, and that the reality is on those areas where mobility is only happening, the connectivity is only happening on the arterials every mile, it does create more problems because and yet there's lots and lots of access points that are being taken off of those. Not every single mile should be a mobility corridor. I think that should be reflected in the map. So I think I'd like some input on this. I'd also note, I think it's amusing that in order to keep cars from bumping into each other, we use non-traversable medians, raised medians, but we don't necessarily do that to keep cars from bumping into kids in bike lanes or on adjacent sidewalks. So I think kind of applying what you've mentioned about vertical elements are the same sort of things. If this is going to be a mobility, we want this to be a mobility corridor. Our vision is to get rid of some of this access so that vehicles can move more and more. Then it's the city that's got to be a partner with us to make sure that happens. And then, as Bree says, if this is a bicycle mobility corridor, then that's a priority. And how do we protect and move that? So I'd love to get some more input on this and see something. You know, with all due respect, I think the language that we still use the word shall should be taken completely out of there.
Okay.
And see some much more comprehensive integration of the vision and the alignment between the land use agencies in any kind of policy language that comes forward.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that. All right. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for your questions. We'll see you next week.